We're going to start the conversation by saying how what would you attribute to the success that your dad experienced in professional career and the recognition that he received as a result of that?
Well, it all came from his mother. She was a very strong woman, especially when back in those days, women were more subservient. The man was the leader. She didn't have a man to lead her home. She was the leader. So she instilled in my father this essence of excellence and the fact that you have to be not just good at what you do, but great at what you do all the time. And that eliminates some of the questions that people may have of your ability, your skill set, your aptitude. So he kept that with him all the time. And he instilled that in us, myself and my brother, as we were growing up. So I think that was the real genesis of what made him who he was. Having that core value that he never diverted from, he never sacrificed. And if he felt as if he was diverting away from his true values, he would walk away. And that's one thing I love about him, his bravery. I don't know if I could have lived through the timing that he lived through because where we are now in the world, but that really was what drove him to be as successful as he was.
Wow, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Now, you just said something now. You don't know when, if you could have lived through the time that he was living through then compared to now. And that's a powerful statement to make because it feels like the way the black people have been treated in America is different from the way it was then. It seems like it's a lot better now. It feels like as a black person you always have to move differently and also be careful of things that white friends don't have to be careful of.
Mhm.
And the book actually stated some instances here
Mhm.
that your dad experienced that I find very interesting.
Mhm. Yes.
One of the situation was when he was growing up in his class. He said in a book, my classmates would comment, "You talk funny," realizing that I was already visually different, and it
Mhm.
dawned on me that I have to let go of my accent.
Mhm.
Somebody that came from Nigeria like me probably still have some accent and things like that. I could really connect with that story that he was talking about then. Even beyond that, it also felt that the expectation of a black person being able to, excuse me, communicate is also different. And he experienced something very different in the car while what he was with your grandmother, his
Mhm.
mom, that people were surprised that he was able to speak English and things like that. Can you contrast that with what he experienced and what you experienced growing up?
Yeah, so thank you for that question. You're correct. And even today, and you and I met through a Toastmasters event, which is a communication and leadership organization where we are committed to the evolution of communication in ourselves and others. It still is interesting when people even say to me, "Oh, you're a really good speaker." Well, why would you not think that I would not be able to articulate a sentence or be able to share what I'm thinking? And for him back then, there weren't many opportunities for Black people to speak up or even to be involved in roles where they actually had a voice at the table. So when I think about the essence of being able to be freer today to speak, and I thrive on ensuring that I am speaking well, I am articulating my words very well, because I want people to be clear in what I'm trying to convey to them. And that was the same thing with my dad. And I never heard him with in any accent other than New York when we first grew up. And then over time, we even lost that accent. But it was a shame that we have to conform. And I applaud those of you who have not said, I am going to maintain my language as I have learned it. And everyone else will learn to understand and train our ears to embrace the accents that we all now bring to the table. It could be from a different country, a different state, even a different part of the city of the state we live in. We all have different dialects. And we are so much more today open and embracing that we're not challenging people to lose their accent or lose their essence or lose the way in which they think and speak. So dad had to do that in order to survive, but we have evolved in that sense a bit, where we don't have to all look and sound the same to be effective.
Wow, wow, thank you. We don't have to look or sound the same to be effective. Diversity of thought, diversity of individuals, it's what really bring the value that we need. That's not the only challenge that your dad went through when he was growing up, even though he had a mother that would always tell him, no human is better than you, Peter. That's what is written in the book. Your grandma passed on earlier when your dad was much younger, when he was 21 years old. And did he ever discuss with you how challenging that was, having to lose a mom, having to lose the mom when he was 21 years old? How was that?
Well, it was interesting because he still had his grandmother, and his grandmother, even though his grandmother and mother did not have the best mother-daughter relationship, she
Mhm,
was still in his life to provide that a bit of a nurturing perspective for him.
mhm,
But I think what we did learn was, and I'm very conscious of this today, was the way in which she died. So she died of colon cancer, and they didn't know what that was way back when. So I'm very conscious of maintaining and understanding my health positions and ensuring that. And that's one thing we don't realize is that historical medical information that we don't pass along. So it wasn't until later on when I had to ask my dad, well, how did your mother die? Because now I needed to reflect that in my own health journey. So I think for him, and he said to me, he realized she died very young. She was in her 50s. And he said, if I live a day past the years in which she lived, I'm great. Because he knew historically, he wasn't quite sure what of those traditional hereditary ailments were passed on. So he lived, fortunately, to live another 20 years longer than she did. So I think for him, he took life as a journey and embraced every day because he knew that you never know. Tomorrow is not promised. So live life every single day as if it's your last. And he absolutely did that up until his very last day.
wow, wow. That's really beautiful. That's very beautiful. One of the things that you mentioned just now is you said your great grandmother and your grandmother did not have the best mother daughter relationship, which is quite a, what I read in the book, but that was very interesting. One of the ones that was surprising is when the issue of the house rent and the ability to say, oh well, your dad and your dad's mom, they had to leave the house to go and find another place at some point because of the rent issues. What was the story behind that?
We never really talked about that, but I think, and there was one part where he never had a father and he never knew who his father was. And I think that was always an issue with the grandmother. So she called him, you get out, you little bastard. And he didn't know what that meant for till years on. And as I was recently, because he passed away in 2023, I was recently looking through his papers, and on his birth certificate, the name for the father was blank. And
Wow.
for some families, that's an issue where you want to have that cohesive, family dynamic of the mother and the father and the child, and you grow together. And but my dad never really discussed the real root issue between his mother and his grandmother. She died before I was born. I had met the grandmother a couple of times and I was very, very, very young. She
Mm,
seemed very nice to me, but I was just a grandchild. So
Yeah.
I don't know, but the essence of mothers and daughters today is always very interesting because we're both everyone's a strong woman. We have our own
Mhm.
opinions,
Mhm.
and we
Yeah.
want to live our own life, whether or not our parents agree with it or not. Even my dad, when he wanted to be a teacher, his mother said, "Oh my God, that's women's work," because she wanted him to be a doctor.
Yep.
A lot of
Yep. Yep.
times, I talk to so many people who come from other countries. They're coming here for the American dream. And that usually is to be a doctor or a lawyer. I say, if you're not a doctor or a lawyer, you're a loser because
Yeah.
nothing else matters to some of those generational parents. So he had that same problem. So I could tell there was probably other conversations that went on during his mother's childhood with her mother, but he never spoke of it. Another dynamic early on, no one said anything about anything. You never knew what discord was going on in the home because they never showed it. It was always behind the scenes.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. So there's this wrong idea that the only way to create American dream, to create generational wealth, is when if only you become a lawyer, engineer, or a doctor, a medical doctor, which is very wrong, as we can see now. The very rich people around, most of them are not even in any of those professions, so to say.
Exactly.
So that's one of the things that are to be corrected.
Hmm.
So still talking about your dad, you wrote in the book, I was quite an observant little boy who asked very few questions because children back then were not permitted to ask questions, and we did not because of the fear of physical pain,
It's a whooping. That's right.
which is something I can really relate to. I was talking to my kids a couple of days and they were talking. I was like, I was moving towards them. I was like, yeah, do you know that when I was growing up, when you're talking to your mom and dad and you see that the dynamic of the conversation is very different and your parent is moving towards you, you have to move back because if you don't move back, you can get a knock or a slap on your face based on what conversation is going on. So when my mom and dad trying to move towards me like that, I have to move back. But now kids just like, yeah, you're not gonna do anything about it. This kind of thing. So that was something that's also very interesting to me. He still was able to go through some challenges. One of the challenges was the bathroom. I read about that in the book.
Yeah.
It seems like the bathroom in the olden days was different.
Yeah.
I'll tell you something quickly. I also observed this when growing up in Nigeria. It seems that the bathroom for the teachers and professors is very different from bathroom for the students. That's the standard thing. I think maybe that's a British thing, but in America, everything is kind of mixed now. It's like really more standardized. But then his own story was that it seems that there was some still not clear demarcation between the female and the male bathroom in those days. And he said he got a lesson in female anatomy. That was an interesting story.
Yes, he said it was in there, and the little girl had to go, so she went ahead and did her thing. And back then, even when I remember in school, there were well, when I went to school, they did have the boys in the girls' room, but probably back then these buildings were so small, and if you think about the classrooms way back when, there probably was only one bathroom for everybody. So yeah, so it was that's a great story.
Wow, interesting, interesting. I can only just picture what the situation looks like then. We live in a different world now
Yeah, and
entirely.
but the thing about that story is that he said his mother took care of it. He never saw that little girl again. So I don't know
Yeah,
what happened to the little girl, but yeah.
yeah, yeah. It seems that though she was not perfect, like anybody's not perfect, but at
Right.
least she was able to be there and guide him at that age because that's a very young age
Yes.
to experience such thing.
Yes. Yes.
So your dad was able to experience a lot of first based on what the title of the book is. If at freshman, he was running for vice president. Second year, he was the treasurer. And it seems that a lot is not expected of a black person
Yeah.
in that kind of situation. They were surprised that he was interested in things like that because
Correct.
it feels like once you're black like that, what you can only commit is a crime. There's also part of the book that I found very interesting that he was saying that most of the time when he was in social environment, he had to go alongside with a woman
Mm-hmm.
because he's a black person. And it's even better if he is going with you
Mm-hmm.
because people find you very attractive, very woman. They're more comfortable when he brings you along to such social gathering. How has that changed now from that time to now?
Well, first of all, my dad was a tall man. He was 6 feet, and he was a big guy, and he had a very deep, commanding voice. And when we think about voices and voice modulation, that's still another area where there's some, I'll say, discrimination, where
Mhm.
maybe we have a higher pitched tone voice or a lower pitched tone voice. We are judged.
Yeah.
So for him, and then in school, he was usually the only African American. His high school, as he mentions, probably 200 kids. He was the only black person. So he always stood out. So he always knew wherever he went, eyes were going to glare to him when he walked in.
Mhm.
So for him, it was important to, and you hate to do this. He had to make everybody else feel comfortable
Mhm.
with him in the
Yeah.
room. So by having someone with him, a female, or even myself, he grabbed me to go to many events because he just wanted people to feel comfortable because he wanted to be approachable. He was a leader and people need to feel comfortable. You need to feel comfortable to talk to a leader, your leader. You've got questions, you've got comments, maybe you have a compliment. So he wanted to be able to say, hey, I'm open for you to come talk to me. I'm a nice guy. I'm a leader. I have things I'm trying to do, but I'm approachable. So having that companion with him, whether it was myself or someone else, allowed him to maneuver rooms and everyone else felt comfortable. And that's still something we have to get better at. I shouldn't have to go out of my way to make you comfortable. If you're not comfortable, I'm probably never going to change how that person feels. But we just have to get better at just embracing the differences.
Wow. Interesting. In my opinion, I think it's probably gotten a little bit better. I think there's there's been some awareness around these, and a couple of white people that I know are aware of these challenges, and they're making some adjustment. And some people are still not. So hopefully, we can still keep making progress. This is an established fact that everybody should know. But then the one that is actually surprising is once in a while you see a black person also showing that kind of attitude to a black person or a colored person like us, which is like, why? I don't understand why that even have to happen. So once in a while you see that going on. There's a couple of experiences that I found very interesting. One of those experiences in the book that your dad narrated was driving while black cats,
Mhm.
driving while black cats.
Yes.
What is that? The black cat that he narrated.
So no matter where he lived, he always befriended the local police because and he always drove a really nice car that the company or school district paid for. So usually he had a beautiful black Lincoln Town car. It was always these big black cars that led to suspicion,
Hmm.
basically, because
Yeah.
even cars have stigmatisms.
Yeah.
And he would befriend the local police, and they would either give him their business card or some kind of police support decal to put in his window.
Mhm.
This way, if he was pulled over, he could say, hey, I know Lieutenant blah blah
Yeah.
blah of the local
Mhm.
station, or
Mhm.
hey, I'm a supporter, you see my sticker. And that helped him tremendously. Not that he got pulled over a ton of times,
Mhm.
but he just wanted to make sure that when he was pulled over, that it was for a proper cause, and if it didn't feel like it was, was able to leverage, because what he would then do, he would take the cop's badge number and name, call his buddy at the department, and say, "Hey, I got pulled over, and this." person did blah blah blah, and then there's usually some reformation behind the scenes. But and it's a shame that we had to do that. But he was prominent in the community as a leader, so he had to be out and about. So he had to have take precautions because that was something that happened often in those days. People would pull over, no probable cause, lock them up for improper reasons. So again, that was just the way the world was of today, even still in some respects. So that was his get out of jail free card, if you will.
Wow, wow, interesting,
Mhm.
interesting. So you would agree that it's a lot lesser in number. The frequency is lower now.
I think so because as even at that point there were not a fair number of black police officers. So I think over time, as all of our industries are diversifying, we are coming together better, and more understanding, and say, well, that's not really a reason to pull the person over. That's not really a reason to harass that person, or even in the department store. It's not really a reason to follow the person around the department store
Yeah.
thinking they're going to, steal something. So I think we've gotten better at trusting each other, but I wouldn't say that we're 100% there.
Wow, wow. Thank you so much. You just mentioned something, the department store. That's one of the stories that I find very interesting in the book Black First. So that's a situation where he narrated that on two accounts, there was a bell, there was a signal that was initiated when he was moving around the store.
Mhm.
And he had to call the manager so that it doesn't happen a third time. And
Yeah.
they actually adjusted. At
Yes.
another time, he also narrated a situation whereby he goes to the store and it almost felt like there's a type of thing that you should buy as a black person. And he was trying to buy something nicer than what he expect. And it seems like they always try to direct him towards something that is cheaper, of lower
Mhm.
value, because, hey, you're black, you should get this because this is what you deserve and things like that.
Yes.
Which made me think, and I've experienced, I thought I was the only one that felt that way. I
Mm.
thought that's not a common thing because it feels like being black in America is like a deficiency,
Mm.
and you have to do something to make up for that deficiency. Either you become so good in a sport, you get a doctor, then oh, he's a doctor. At least maybe it's not capable of a crime as much as other black people, and is dressing better. You dress better, you wear suit. I
Mhm.
see a lot of black people wearing suit, where you
Mhm.
see a white person like they don't have to wear a suit; they just dress normally. And it seems that the black person wearing a suit can now be comparable with a white person dressing casual, because now you guys are now equal based on that. Is there any backstory that you want to share concerning that? Anything that you think have changed over the time based on what happened then and where we are now?
Well, for me, in the working environment, what I don't like, but it probably helped neutralize some of that was when we went business casual. So now everybody stopped wearing suits. Everybody went to a collared shirt, dress pants, no jacket, no tie, even. So I think that helped because now when you used to be able to say, oh, that person wearing the suit is the leader, sometimes the leader is just wearing, khakis and a collared shirt like yourself sitting there.
Yeah.
Now we don't know. So it has neutralized a bit people's perception of who we are and what we do. We used to be able to say the person in the suit's the leader, person wearing jeans and sneakers is not. But now we all wear whatever we want. That has helped tremendously, in my opinion, because we all can now relax a bit and do our jobs. We're not so worried about how we look. We can now be focused in on what we are doing and how we're trying to move the world in a better direction and achieve success. So that for me, and my dad wore a tie every single day. He didn't care about business casual. He didn't care about any of that because he grew up in the times when that was what it was. But today, I love that we all can dress for our day. We say that sometimes, and we now can dress for our in our own comfort zone. So that has gotten a lot better.
Wow, interesting. I'm happy it's gotten better. I hope we can keep making progress based on this. So one of the situations I also found very interesting in the book was when he started being a leader in a school environment, and he experienced a substitute teacher from the district that he was a leader that introduced voodoo during a teaching. What is the backstory to that? How would anybody think that is appropriate?
Well, I would say, and he and I didn't get into that particular story because he's had so many stories, but for me, when we are, and I'm not a teacher, but I would think when we're trying to connect with our student population, we're trying to be innovative and creative, and we're trying to somehow connect with the students. I would assume that for that particular teacher, she felt that was a way that was innovative and connectable. Now, whether or not the students did or did not, in her mind, and I was not in her mind, I'm thinking she thought that was different and effective. Because remember in school, you always had that one cool teacher. Everybody wanted to be in that teacher's class because they said,
Mhm.
"Oh, the teacher does really good stuff. We have fun, we learn," and teachers want to be that teacher. They really do. I think that that was probably her thought. But and whatever voodoo it was, and whether or not the voodoo actually worked, I don't know. But for my dad and his way in which he wanted to run the school district, that was not part of the programming. So subsequently, he terminated her and actually her teaching certificate. Yeah.
Wow. I mean that's a good disciplinary action. That's very inappropriate in a working environment.
But I don't
Even if
discredit the creativity because you have to be creative. But I guess that wasn't the right way to do it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. You're very right. You're very right. Still talking about what kids have to go through in class. There was a point in your dad's leadership he advocated for college medical office to stock condoms for taking, especially at the end of the day on Fridays.
Mhm.
I must explain that this is one of the cultural shock that I experienced when I first came to America because I did my undergraduate in Nigeria, and I went to the clinic. I came to the clinic in America and I went to the clinic and I saw a pile of condoms and I said, "Oh, pick as much as you can," because I was like, "What for?" When I also now read the book, I was like, "Oh yeah, it's not only at that level." My question is because I'm in health sciences. I do research in HIV. I also have some experience in cancer and things like that. How effective did you think that was, and how 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 should that be presented to kids in this age, such that it's actually doing what it's supposed to do?
Yes, great question. And I think, and putting myself in my dad's shoes, that was genius. Because, and it's of course prevalent now, teenagers will be teenagers. Teenagers want to explore with each other, and he had already seen as an administrator the after effects of that. So now you have young ladies who are pregnant in school. They may not be able to finish school now or whatever. They have the baby, and now it's all about childcare and who's the father. So he was always thinking about the post activity. So if you could go ahead and back up and prevent, get to the root cause, he knew he couldn't stop having kids from having sex. But he could at least assist in having them do it safely and enabling them to not have to have a conversation later on with both parents, hers and his, around the possibility of there being a child on the way. And I think his mindset about that what was great. And I don't know if a lot of, I'm sure schools do that today. Way back when, it was probably, oh my God, it's taboo. Why would you do that? But in certain school districts, you can't stop the kids from being kids. And I believe, and even today when we talk about what some of the legislative rulings going on pertaining to abortion and Planned Parenthood and things like that, it's a shame because sometimes people make mistakes. So we don't want to, we can always, certain mistakes you can fix and certain mistakes you cannot. And his thought was, if I can help prevent some of these mistakes, then I've done my job. So that was a wonderful thing that he did. I don't know how often he had to restock the machine, but it was genius, and it saved also the child from having to go into a store or whatever it may have been, because there's a bit of an embarrassment piece there too. So it really
Wow.
was helping shield the children from having to go someplace and purchase
Yeah.
such items if they could get it somewhere where there's wherever he had the vending machine, but at least they were in the building and it was a little bit more secured.
Good. Good. Thank you for sharing that. That's very powerful. I think it's something that can be very helpful to support people at that young age. You talked about mistakes. Some can be prevented, some cannot be prevented. One of the mistakes that was discussed in this book is gambling. The practice of gambling, which is very common, even with Black people.
Yeah.
People will lose their food, they lose their rent, and things like that. How has that changed now? When you look at the environment, how has that changed in Black people, and how can that be better?
Well, way back then, when his grandmother was involved in it, it was illegal. But now we utilize the proceeds from the lottery, the daily number, the casinos to help fund education. So I think what we've done around letting people have hobbies, we'll call them hobbies, but now some of those proceeds are now benefiting the good. So I guess it's a matter of you using something that feels bad to do something for the good. Where well, way back when it was kind of under the table, things weren't really going on. But I think the population, the casino industry is still very much booming and growing. And again, what the proprietors of those types of establishments now understand that there's a piece that is really a give back to others, to empower and help others. I don't condone gambling to the point that you have to foreclose on your home because you have this habit, and we have Gamblers Anonymous for that to help people also. But I do believe people now do it more for leisure as opposed to making a living on it, which is what his grandmother was kind of doing with the people who were renting from her in her home.
Wow. Wow. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing. I mean, I can almost imagine that if somebody is trying to make a living from losing their money, they're gonna have to foreclose their home at some point. So it makes sense. It makes sense. It's a very delicate path to take.
Yes. And he still loves gambling to the end. Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Interesting. Interesting. One of the emotional stories that was also talked about in the book, A Black First, was the 9/11. After the 9/11
Mhm.
event in 2001,
Yeah.
your dad visited the children on the second day, and one of the kids asked
Yep.
from the book, Mr. Carter, why do other people hate us so much?
Mm-hmm.
That's a very powerful observation for a kid to make at a very young age. And some adults will say they don't understand why that question can even come to play because it's irrelevant. So an adult saying, well, how can somebody ask such a question? And it's a young person saying, asking such question.
Mm-hmm.
My question around that is how has that changed, especially based on the climate now, the political scene now? Is it getting better? What can we do to just at least make sure that people are aware of this kind of emotions that is valid?
That's a great question, and I even think about not just 9/11, but now more recently, well, probably the last 8 to 10 years, what's been even happening inside our schools around things like, Columbine, or Texas a couple of years ago. The 9/11, for that student to ask that question was wonderful, because we now have instances happening inside our schools of the same nature. Now the real question is, why do we even hate each other? It's not even about other countries not liking us or liking us. It's even within ourselves now, and it's so challenging. And it's a blessing. And we didn't talk about how I had my dad retire at age 60, but it gets difficult leading these schools, because you don't know what a child is going through at home, or what a parent is going through, and what they bring into these schools, or what they're bringing into the workplace, or what they're bringing into the supermarket. You don't know, and it's challenging, because now we all live in fear, whether we're living in here or in Gaza and Israel and Texas, Canada, everywhere. We're living in fear now, which is a shame. And I don't think that we hate each other. I think is we don't understand each other. And that gets back to communication, which my dad thrived in, was the ability to communicate and let people understand what each other were thinking and get to some solutions. I think we do a lot of talking, but we never get to solutioning. And that's why everything is prolonged and never ends. We'll see copycat reoccurrences, or areas in which we just don't understand. We don't just take the time to stop and have a conversation. I don't think it's a hate. I think it's just not being clear and not understanding each other. And that goes back to the quote earlier around, leaders, that's part of the problem. We're trying to help communicate with those who can't communicate, and even those who are not listening. So in the world today, it is challenging. And in the last couple of years, and Dad died in 2023, and I would love to hear what he's thinking about what's been going on recently,
Oh,
because he always had an opinion, always wanted to communicate that. So I'm imagining what he would be thinking about if he was still here today. But I don't think it's hate. I think it's a lack of understanding. That's my opinion.
wow, lack of understanding. That's very powerful. That's why some people would say that sometimes action does not equals intent.
Mhm.
That means that if, even though somebody's carrying out something and doing something, what they're passing across to the other person might be misinterpreted based on the way that person interprets it, and that becomes a problem. The first thing is that the person that does not know what they are doing is making the other person to feel that way, and the other person is not even telling the first person that, well, you're actually making me feel this way.
Yes, right. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, so communication is a very big piece to that. Thank you for sharing that. That's very powerful. One of the stories that I actually really liked getting to the family scene is your brother. It was
Mhm.
written in the book
Mhm.
Black Frost that your brother was supposed to receive a scholarship, organization annual scholarship, and he was not given because of the family situation that your dad had going on. What is the backstory? Is that even something that is really real? Is what's the story behind that?
Well, I don't know all of the background. So as high school students, we all apply for various scholarships that are given out by different nonprofit organizations, and there are certain criteria that you have to comply to in order to qualify to be one of the
Mhm.
recipients, or at least be part of the selection committee.
Yep.
And there was one award that my brother applied for, and my every parent thinks their child's the best. Of course,
Of
my
course.
child's the best, your child's the best. And my dad clearly, and I don't know if he knew, I don't know, someone on the committee or what it was, but he felt that my brother should have received this particular scholarship from this particular organization. And it was given to a female, and then to some of that he said, well, her parents were together, his was not. The child was slightly lighter skinned tone than we were. So there's like a lot of again, this in his opinion, this is how he thought it, why and how it went down. I suffice to say, sometimes there is racism within the races.
Hmm.
But and sometimes, and you would think, why would that make a difference? We're all similar shading. Why would we want to start to even discriminate against each other? We need each other. So my thought around that is, whether or not the other young lady's qualifications were better, or her essay was better, or whatever it was that they selected her as opposed to my brother. We all win some, we lose some.
Yeah.
But that particular situation for my dad stuck out for some reason. But he never discussed it around the fact that he felt that because my parents were divorced, that became a discreditor toward my brother getting that particular award.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what he felt. That's what I
Yeah,
read in the book.
right,
It could be
right.
right. It could be wrong. We're not even in a position to know that for sure.
Correct. But he was a very visible parent. It wasn't like he was not around. If he had something was going on, he was there. He was living in Delaware at the time. He would get in the car and come to New York where we were. So it wasn't like there are certain parents that you would never see. But he was visible even though my parents were divorced.
Wow. Wow. Interesting.
Hmm.
Interesting.
Hmm.
And your dad explained it in a very light way. He said one could say that I was on an 8-year plan when it came to the nuptial experience. That was very funny to me when I was reading that. I've been married for some time now. Excuse me. I know marriage can be very challenging, and it takes the grace of God. It takes a little bit of luck to stay in it for a good amount of time. So I can connect to what he was trying to say there, and that was something that was really interesting. But then also connected to that was the story that he told about he while he was trying to get his PhD, he met somebody that was a friend, and they were in love, and the person ended with another person. But then, as fate would have it, the person actually helped you along the way.
Yes.
What was the story behind that?
Well, I did not know. I had met. He has a lot of friends, and I would meet them intermittently if there was an event or I was visiting or we'd get together. So I had met his friend, and I didn't think anything of it. It wasn't until even this part where I they had been friends forever. There's always people that are with you in life forever. My brother, the same thing. We just have people who we keep with us no matter where we are and what we're doing. And that was what this woman was to him. And I thought it was great because sometimes you need someone that you're not attached to have a conversation with. You have similar personalities. She was also Trinidadian. So they had a lot of common things to talk about. So I had no idea. But I knew she was always there as a friend. And it wasn't until realistically in the book where he actually did say that there was something more to their friendship because she was a little bit younger than him.
Mhm.
So, but she still to this day, and he did because I was struggling with my dissertation. Talk about some possible discrimination, racism. There was some of that during my dissertation process, and he said to me, "You need someone who's been through this, just to talk to, check in, and say, is this make sense, or is this something I need to explore, or something I might need to report?" And he attached me with her because she had her PhD already, and she was very helpful in helping me navigate and even kept me motivated because there was at some point I'm like, I don't, this is not worth it. Oh my god! But she really was wonderful in saying, you can get through it. Here's what you need to do. And a wonderful friend to me today. So, yes, sometimes we have people in our lives. You don't know how they've come to be in your life, but you really appreciate who they are. And I truly appreciate her assisting him and being his friend through all the different marriages and other girlfriends and things. She was always there just to be a friend. And I really appreciate that. And we all need someone like that in our lives.
Good, good. Yeah, I totally agree with you. I totally agree with you. That was a very I learned a lot from that story. That you always just don't make people your enemy because things don't work out.
Right.
Somebody said that if you must close the door, at least close it gently.
Mhm. Ah, yes.
Yeah, that's what I try to do. If I see that the relationship is not working and things like that, I just close the door so that if I have to open the door again,
Right.
the door is not destroyed.
That's right. Correct. Yes, that's right. I friendship is more important than anything else to me. Yes.
That's very true. That's very true. One of the stories from the book again that I find very interesting was your dad turning down the opportunity to invite the Beatles to fly into America and to Portland for their debut concert. And he thought that was a big mistake that he made. He could have contributed to their career. Any backstory to that?
I only learned about that in the book. He never talked about it. And apparently what he felt was, and again, it gets back to when you're in these positions of leadership, you have to make a decision thinking about the future. Will this damage my career, or will this help my career, or will it help the other person's career? For him, he felt the name the Beatles. What is that? Is that a bug? What is that? And it just didn't. And sometimes you have situations presented to you where you're like, yeah, I don't know,
Yeah,
doesn't sit well with me, and you say no. Needless to say, the Beatles did end up coming over from England and had a wonderful career. And my dad, of course, regretted not bringing them over. And he could have said, I was the one that brought them over.
yeah,
And I didn't realize that, but what he does have and did have was tons of Beatles paraphernalia. I'm like, wow, you're a real fan. But he was only a real fan because of how he messed how he messed it up the first
unfortunately.
time. So from that point on, when they got famous, he was all over it because hindsight's 2020.
Wow, wow. Experience. That's a very big experience. So in your own personal life, is there any situation whereby you judge a situation in certain way and you find out, wow, I actually misjudged the situation?
Oh, all the time. I think, and what I try to do, and this is, I'll just spin Toastmasters for a minute here, because this is a great way in which we love to be able to give people an opportunity when we're not quite sure, or we don't even feel that we're ready to take on whatever the next step is. And it does get back to thinking about the ratio of failure. What's the probability of something failing, and what might the penalty be for doing that? If there's not a whole lot of risk, why not do it? Give somebody the opportunity to come and sing for the school, or give somebody an opportunity to be an officer in a Toastmasters club, or give somebody an opportunity to take on a role in your organization. If there's not a lot of risk in you providing that person the opportunity, often they are so honored and blessed that you trusted them. They go out of their way to do well. That's
Yeah,
what I have found. I never try to judge someone based on their past. The past is helpful in understanding what they bring to the table. The question, though, is what are they going to do when they're at the table?
yeah,
How are they going to ensure their own success by taking extra training, asking more questions, reaching out to more resources, going online, whatever it is they need to do to be successful? That's what I like to lean on. Too often, when we're looking at a resume or something else, we're saying, oh, you didn't do this, you didn't do this, you didn't do that, because they didn't have the opportunity to do it. So give them a chance. So I think that's what I learned from that mistake of my dad
Mhm.
is understanding risk versus reward. And if there's not a lot of risk, let's just go for it. We can fix it as we're, you say you build it as you're flying it.
Mhm.
That's what we can do.
Wow, interesting,
Mhm.
interesting. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing that. I cannot but ask this question based on how your dad grew up. He described it as very poor, but he was ambitious and very hardworking. And at some point, he was not having much time to prepare food, apparently. He was eating McDonald's cheeseburger regularly, and he eventually had heart attack at 50 years.
Yes.
What what do you think you could have done differently, and what would you recommend in for people now? Maybe there's somebody actually doing the same thing now. What advice would you give the person?
Well, my dad was a workaholic. I would tell you he lived in certain places he never turned the stove on. He would get up, get dressed, stop at McDonald's, get his coffee, head into the office, whatever they did for lunch, he did for lunch. Probably had an evening meeting or a board meeting or something to do at one of the schools, and then would get home late, maybe have a snack or something and go to bed. And that was pretty much his life but when you love what you do, it doesn't feel like work. And that was him. But
Mm,
at the same time, because there were certain periods in his life when he was not married, there was not someone preparing a meal for him so that when he got home, he could heat it up and eat it. He would come home to an empty house. It's just him. No sense of doing a lot of food shopping if you're not going to be around much. What I would say is that there are a lot more healthier options in the world today. Also, back then it was just McDonald's, Burger King, Hardee's. And those of you who are very old like me, now we
mhm,
have a lot of healthier fast food options. Panera Bread, tons of these different salad places, so that those of us who are on the go, and I've even gotten better, I will food shop, I will cook, and I will use my stove for that very reason, because our health is so important. And because he had that heart attack at 50, he did have, some valve work done, but then he had, in the end, he had total blockage in one of his arteries, and he did not want to have any more surgery. What I would say to people is, and with that in mind, I make sure I go to all my doctors. So we have to get better at taking care of ourselves medically by getting all of our annual, whatever, all those appointments. See your doctor, get your physical if you need to. If you have cardio issues, get your EKG, echocardiogram. If you have colon issues, get your colonoscopy. We have to be better and stop being afraid of going to the doctor. When we don't go, and we wait until we're really ill, then a lot of times it's hard to solve whatever problems we could have solved earlier on in life. I know for sure I have to get better at exercising, and we can raise our hands about who doesn't exercise enough. That's me, and I'm trying to got my water here today. So it
yeah.
really is balance. And now we are all asking for that. We are demanding it now. We are not working 100 hours a week. We are taking time off. We are going on vacation. We are spending time with our family. We are sitting down doing nothing because we need to. That is what we really have to focus on, because life is short. Yes, he had that heart attack at 50. His mother had died at age 57, 58. He lived to be almost 80. He died a couple of years short. We have to take better care of ourselves. Luckily, the with technology and the medical sciences, there's a lot more opportunities for us to do that, which is wonderful. When way back when they had no idea what some of these ailments were, now we have lots of information and ways in which we can start to manage them.
Wow.
That's really what we need to do.
Wow. Interesting. Interesting. It's interesting that you mentioned marriage just now when you were saying, oh, he was not married and things like that. So based on all the experience that he had and based on the things that you see around, how would you pitch marriage to somebody in that sense? For people who are like, well, I don't think this is what I want to do. I don't. I've met people that say, well, I don't want to marry. I don't want to have kids. It was one of my cultural shock when I first came because I was like, oh, that's to an African, that's not even an option. That's not something you call your parents to ask to tell them, oh, I don't want to marry. I don't want to have kids. That's not a conversation you have. But people who have that idea, how would you sell marriage? Because she just mentioned it that well, that could have been something that could have made the situation better, right?
Mhm.
How would you encourage such people to consider it?
Well, it's tough for me because I'm not married. So hard question to answer. And I think it's a choice for people. Everyone has the way they're living their lives is their choice. And but we have to realize that we as we're making choices for ourselves, we have to there's always a give and take, whether you're with someone or you're not with someone. I think I condone people being with people who compliment them, who lift them up, keep them energized, keep them interested, keep them laughing.
Yeah,
I'm about companionship. It doesn't matter if you want to tie the knot and say you're married and the benefits that go along with that, or you are just living together, or you're just dating. I think people just need companionship.
yeah,
And sometimes eh, we want to be with someone, sometimes we don't.
yeah.
But I would say my dad was never alone. He had lots of things to do. And sometimes that's all people want. They just want somebody to do things with. Like again, if he had an event to go to and he really didn't have someone to go with him, he'd call me and I would happily drive from wherever I was living. One time we went to an event in New Jersey. I was living in Atlanta. I flew in, changed in the airport, Newark,
Mhm.
changed in Newark airport, and then met him at the event. So
Yeah,
sometimes you do what you have to do to help each other out, whether it's family, friends, whomever. So for me, it's about the companionship. So people need people. I believe part of the problem, and I don't even want to start talking about the mental health situation here. I think people need people in their lives, and sometimes we don't have the right people in our lives.
wow, the right people, companionship. I always say that it's that. I mean, the basis, even in the Bible, the basis of marriage is companionship.
Mhm.
If you take if you take the companionship away from it, it's meaningless. And
Mhm.
that's the original idea of God when He created marriage in the first place. And people have distorted it for some strange reasons now.
Mhm.
We're getting to the end of our conversation today. A little bit about the retirement and the decision to write a book.
Mhm.
How did that came about?
No, he mentions that I told him to retire. I can't remember the exact situation, but I knew for sure what I was seeing in him toward the later years was it was more complaining and less uh fun in the journey and the outcomes. Everything seemed a lot more stressful between the students and the parents and the school board and the community and whoever else you had to interact with. And I knowing, health situation, I say, you know what? I think you've probably reached the pinnacle of your career. Now he did go on and do a few more things in an interim capacity that he talks about in his second book, but his trajectory around coming from a school teacher, assistant principal, principal, administrator, district administrator, back into the school districts, I had felt as if he had done so much and his legacy was solid, solid legacy. How about let's just step back because his work, again, working 24/7, he had no hobbies.
Hmm.
Let's just step back and say, what a nice time to walk away. And he gets his full pension. The educational benefits is great. You can go ahead, retire, relax, sit back, even though can't do that. He's always on the go. So it could be a nice clean break. And he really thought about it. And of course, you work the numbers with your financial advisor. And he said, okay, yeah, I'm going to do that. So I thought that was, and he really enjoyed his retirement life. And I was so excited for him for that because so often we see people work themselves to death. And I did not want that to happen for him. Yeah.
Wow, that's a very that's why you are. It seems that you're his favorite. Based on-
Well, there was two of us, me and my brother, but it was just the two of us. Yeah, and with the
That's good.
book, what I did with the book, and actually this was the original first time we did it. He wanted something very plain,
Hmm.
and then his second book was very plain. But
Hmm.
when his passing, I said I want to revive it and
Yeah,
jazz up the cover. So we
yeah,
jazzed up the
make it.
first cover, yep, and then we jazzed up the second cover. And I also published a journal, a reflective journal, where a person could either read the books and follow along in the journal or read the journal independently and really scribe out their thoughts about situations that he's gone through. But I was helping him clean the basement, and he does not throw anything away. And that became my problem 2 years ago. But I said, you've got a lot of great artifacts, articles, stories. You need to write your book because you need to share what you've been through to empower other educators. It is tough out there being a teacher or principal or administrator, anything in the school districts. You need to share your story. And he's like, I don't have that kind of time. But COVID came and he
Yeah,
had plenty of time because he wasn't going anywhere. And he decided between myself and one of his friends from one of the areas he worked in, we had convinced him to finally sit and put pen to paper, and he wrote this book. There was a lot more detail to like for him to share, but sometimes you can't share everything because for fear of people
yeah,
coming back to say that wasn't true.
yeah,
I don't remember it that way. But when you're writing your own memoirs, it is based on your thoughts and perception. And I do
yeah,
put that at the beginning of the book. But I was so glad when he wrote it because there was, again, going back to people don't talk about their lives. A lot of things I learned in this book, which is a shame. So I'm so glad that I had him write it because then there I know now I know there would have
yeah,
been things I would have never known because you
yeah,
never know when your life is going to end. And he passed
yeah,
away in 2023.
yeah.
Had we not done these books in 2019, 2020, there would have been so many unknowns. So I encourage everyone, especially if you have aging parents, if you can pull information out of them, that is truly what we need to do from a legacy perspective. We need to understand our history. We need to know what they went through. We need to take their lessons learned and utilize them for ours and educate the next generations going forward.
Wow, wow, that's a very powerful thing to do. So my last question: when you remember your dad, what comes to your mind, and what do you think we still have to know about him? What do you think we missed in the discussion today that we should know about him?
He always was true to his friends. Those that came along with him for the journey, he truly cherished. And I'll tell you how I realized that. When we had the funeral, people came out that he met 60 years ago, and these people are older now. One guy came, he had came with a cane. He said, I'm not missing this. And they had stories to tell. The one guy said when my dad worked at one of the schools, he had keys to all the rooms. So they knew when they heard the keys, they better straighten up whatever they were doing, bad or good, bad or indifferent. They better straighten up because here comes keys.
Mm-hmm.
So what I definitely want people to remember about my dad is that
Hmm.
he truly loved what he did,
Hmm.
and he truly loved children and wanted to ensure their education, and that they everyone had an equal opportunity to be educated. Knowing what he went through to make sure he was educated with his mother's assistance, not every child has that opportunity. So he wanted to be that guide that many children do not have. And that will be what will be is missing today with him not being here, because there was so much more he wanted to do around, especially as we're looking at changing laws around, and now we're funding, defunding, starting to change the parameters of what school districts look like. Children are our future. We have to allow them the opportunities to learn, to grow, to know what it is to live in the world we're in today, how they can be able to be part of it in a fruitful way, enabling it to continue to grow. And those of us who are a little bit older, we won't be concerned about what it looks like when we're gone.
Hmm.
So that's what I need for people to really understand about my dad.
Wow. It's important you just mentioned something now that he really loved kids. I did miss that part out from the book. There was a position that he didn't want to accept, and only trick him to accept the position because, oh, you love the kids, do it for the kids.
Yeah. Mhm.
That's part of what I read from the book. That was also very interesting. All right, please, what's your last thing you want to say to our guests? Any services you're offering? Anything that you're doing next that you want viewers to be part of?
Yes, well, thank you for the opportunity. As you mentioned, these are the books. A Black First, Leading Through Educational Barriers and Biases. The second book, The Blackness Continues. The first book takes you from when he came from Trinidad at age 2 to when he retired at age 60. The second book takes you from his age 60 and his retirement work, because he continued to serve in the educational space, now as more of an expert witness, a consultant. So now, as the external voice, he could look into school districts and see what's going on and how he could make them better. So that's the second book. And as I just mentioned earlier, I created a journal. It's a hardcover where every chapter is summarized, and then there are reflective questions for a person who's considering leadership, education, they're already in education, just to help guide them and help them think about what are they doing today, what are they working on, how can they impact their schools, their community, parents, school boards, etc. So those are the items I have in honor of my dad's book. And I am what you mentioned earlier, a corporate strategist. Those who work in corporate, especially women, those who work in the insurance industry, those who work in finance, but even entrepreneurs, the struggle for women is still the same. We are still trying to make sure our voices are being heard. We are still working to get our, in the door and get to the table to share our ideas. I've been working on every year, this is coming up on my third year. I have a book anthology called Letters to My Corporate Sisters. This was last year, volume 2. I am coordinating co-authors for my volume 3 for 2025. Similarly to my dad, we need to share our stories. When you mentioned, Dr. Tulu, how you thought something happened to you was just you, that happens a lot. We all think our situations are isolated. They are not. They are happening everywhere. But we need to share that, because our story can save someone else. So any corporate women, and you don't have to work in corporate, if you have a story that will empower other women, I would love to talk to you about being in my book. If you go to my website, drelizabethcarter.com, I have information about my coaching programs. I am a speaker. I speak on leadership. I have a conversation about me and my dad pertaining to personal validation and external validation. I would say I lived my life to ensure my dad said good job. And many of us do that, looking for that validation, but really it's about us on the inside, validating ourselves. And that's the only thing that's important. So reach out to me. I'd love to talk to you about coaching, or if you want me to come speak on your podcast or on your stage, virtual or live. I love to be able to do that. So thank you
Good,
for the option.
good, good. Thank you so much, Dr. Elizabeth Carter. Thank you. This has been a very exciting journey talking about the Black First. And please, I recommend this book, especially for people that love history and things like that. This is the end of the 40th episode of Solution Illuminators Series podcast. Please like, subscribe, and if you want to be a guest on this podcast, there's also going to be a link for you to feel to be part of us. Till we'll have another discussion again. Bye for now.